Mark Rogers TV talking Oklahoma State football. Can you believe we're just about 3 weeks away from going to fall camp that first week of August? So we bring in Robert Whetsell of Cowboys Ride for Free on SB Nation to talk about the Cowboys. And Robert, it's been a while, so it's nice to see you.
Yes, and it's been a long, quiet spring and early summer. So I'm definitely excited for football coming around the corner here in about 3.5 weeks.
Maybe quiet for you, maybe quiet for me on certain fronts. I know not on the work front for you, but when we look at Cowboys fans, they haven't been real quiet because we discussed it before we came on. They're expecting a whole lot out of this football team, and in particular, Mason Rudolph. So that's based on a good finish to the season, maybe not a great finish. Maybe you'll uncover some things that maybe go beyond the stat sheet for Rudolph down the stretch.
Well, I think there's no question for the Oklahoma State fan base that the team looked completely different. Once the unfortunate concussion to Dax Garman, opened the door for Rudolph's red shirt to be burned. And the team looked like the team of old in some respects. It was wide open. We were seeing the entire playbook was being opened up. Rudolph, even as a true freshman, definitely showed a composure, a calm in the pocket. He's also a huge kid, huge. I mean, he was not easy to bring down in the pocket. He had a good pocket presence, felt the rush, and moved well when he needed to move. He's definitely, as far as what Oklahoma State's used to seeing, he's definitely going to be more like a Brandon Weeden than a Clint Shelf. Clint Shelf, they definitely used to run the ball. Specifically with him. Rudolph, at least in the 3 games we saw last year, there was really no designed running for him. He was pretty much purely a pocket passing type of a quarterback, which obviously goes back to the days of Brandon Weeden, which I'm sure OSU fans are very excited about. The one thing to keep in mind is that while he was thrown into a pretty harsh environment as a true freshman, on the road against Baylor, on the road in Bedlam against OU, and then on the road against Washington in the bowl game, and some pretty good defenses. He's playing against some pretty good talent, none of them at home for him, and he performed very well. The one thing to keep in mind, and this could be that, a true freshman, he made mistakes, but late against Baylor and late against OU, with the game hanging in the balance, Rudolph threw late interceptions. They weren't what I would call horrible, terrible, like, oh my God, why did you throw that ball? But he did throw it in a couple of places that allowed him to get picked off. OU and Bob Stoops bailed him out. Baylor didn't bail him out. So I think one of the things we're going to watch for is, what you would expect from someone who would mature and grow a little bit at the QB position. That is his completion percentage, which was below 60%. You'd like to see that get above 60%. You'd like to see him not throw late game interceptions when things are maybe a little tight. What you do like is he had a great chemistry with Brandon Shepard and with James Washington. Also David Glidden. He distributes the ball well. So I can see why Oklahoma State fans are excited. They've got a good start to the season. You'll really get to allow the team, I think, to sort of get their feet under them, get a feel. Rudolph can kind of shake off maybe a little bit of the sophomore jitters now that it's his team. So I think there's reason to be excited, but there's also reason to say, hey, okay, hang on a minute. Let's not go overboard.
So I was trying to look up who you've got in week 1. It's like Central Michigan or somebody. So you're not comparing them to Florida State, I take it.
Absolutely not.
Okay. All right. Just want to clarify that. All right. Well, he's going to need a running game like any quarterback, especially coming into his true sophomore season with only a handful of starts under his belt. So Desmond Rowland's gone, very reliable back. How do you shape up at running back, and who are those guys that we can look for?
Well, I think this is by far and away the biggest roster question going into fall camp. Obviously, Oklahoma State made a big splash on signing day, flipping Chris Carson, who was previously committed to Georgia, flipping him last minute, and that was without question the biggest move of signing day. A JUCO transfer out of Butler Community College in Kansas, and he's a thick running back. He's a physical running back. It still remains to be seen, because coming back from last season is Rennie Childs, and he's really the only running back coming back for the Cowboys that had any real regular game experience. And it's going to be a big question as to who's going to be the running back that's going to get 20 carries a game. Gundy's made it clear he likes to see about 40 carries in a game, anywhere between 30, 40 carries in a game. He's looking for somebody to take it 20, and then looking for a couple of other guys to split 10 and 10. Childs can definitely be the 10 carry guy. We've seen that. That's what he's been. Is he capable of being the 20 carry guy and taking that punishment? We don't know. He got dinged up a little bit last year when asked to carry a little more of the load. Carson is expected. Nobody's seen him. He's in summer camp right now. He's not officially on the roster yet, but people are definitely expecting Carson to just step in and take that kind of physical back, carry the load role that Desmond Rowland had. So outside of those two players, let me tell you what, it is a free-for-all. Todd Mays came in before getting a minor injury in the spring. There was a little chatter about Todd Mays, but he's more of a scat back type of, player, quick, good moves in the open field. He's not going to be your physical, carry it every down guy. And really behind him, who knows? I have trouble pronouncing the guy's name. It kills me every time I look at it, but it's here we go. It's Sione Palelei, I think, is as close as I can get. He came out of Louisiana, high expectations, suffered a knee injury, I believe, coming into the fall camp, and so he was out last season. So hopefully he can carry some of that load. There's some names there. It's just an unknown. It's a big unknown for the Cowboys. For all we know, maybe you have to put J.W. Walsh in at running back a little bit. Who the heck knows? But I think roster-wise, that's by far and away the biggest question mark out there for OSU. The offensive line, I think people are willing to have a little confidence going into the fall, partly because of Victor Saleko, who came from University of Alabama, Birmingham, when they dissolved the football program, and also from the hiring of the offensive line coach, who the name is escaping me right now, that came from Buffalo, Greg Atkins, who seems to have caught on well with the players, has a little more of a Joe Wickline feel to him. So I think people are willing to kind of look at the offensive line and say, hey, I think I'll be comfortable there. But running back's definitely a huge question mark for the Cowboys going into fall.
So, Robert, if we go back 1 year, you're coming off a season in which you came within a turnover late in the game against Missouri from being in the top 10 in the country to finish off the season. That defense was just completely littered with first-team All-Big 12 candidates in the front seven on defense. Just really good defensive line play, linebackers, experience, productivity. You lost all that, or just about all of it. And then you come into last season and played well against Florida State, but then, really got whacked against TCU and some upper echelon teams in the Big 12, and then played much better down the stretch. So I'm leading into the expectations question coming into this season, if that's just based on Rudolph, or is there thoughts of what happened last season elsewhere on the football team that looked really good?
Well, I think you hit on a great point. Is not only were they a late turnover away from potentially beating Missouri and finishing in the top 10, but if you go back one more game, they're a dropped interception away from being Big 12 champions. Okay, if they win the game against OU. So, a couple of things turn differently. As we know in college football, that can happen. The great teams, the championship teams, all need a little bit of luck. And as OSU folks would probably like to say, is we haven't had too much luck in those moments, but it is what it is. I think, when you look at how much the Oklahoma State lost from that 2013 squad on the defensive side of the ball specifically, when you're talking the team probably lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 80% of their tackles. From 2013 coming to 2014, the team tackles, they probably lost around 80%, maybe even close to 90% of that number. When you come into this season, even though the team is still relatively young, you're bringing back probably 80 to 90% of your tackles from last year. So while they're still a little bit green, probably the experience on the defensive side of the ball is without question. Every position is deep. Even defensive tackle, where they had to replace Castleman, James Castleman, and Ofahata, they've got some guys that have come in there. They're going to be too deep at defensive tackle. They're almost 3 deep at defensive end. They're 3 deep at linebacker. They're 3 deep at cornerback. They're 2 deep at safety. So, you know, you've got a ton of kids coming back on the defensive side of the ball who, while they might not be all, you know, juniors and seniors, these kids have a ton of game experience already. So I think defensively, you're definitely going to see an improvement for the team this year, which should give the offense a little more room to maneuver, I think.
Okay, Robert, we've got plenty of time to break down the schedule, talk about the season expectations, and preview the season. I think too many people take what happened last year and assume it's going to duplicate itself. So looking at Baylor and TCU being the class of the league, assuming they're going to be the class again. Yes, they should be, and I'm not suggesting in any way that TCU is going to revert back to 4-8 from 2 years ago. They're really, really good, but I think there's just an assumption that that the elite teams are going to stay the elite teams from year to year, and that's not necessarily the case, because if there's a chink in the armor between those two, then it's really wide open after that, because you've got a lot of teams that could win anywhere between 6 and 9 games, or maybe more.
Yeah, and I think for the Big 12 this year, I think the only certainty, if as much as you could say it's a certainty, I think the only certainty is TCU. I mean, if you look at all the other teams, quarterback is a big question mark in this league. And, you know, you look at all the offensive talent that was lost. Baylor lost some significant offensive talent, particularly at quarterback. You've got a brand new guy coming in at QB for Baylor. You know, that's an unknown. I think, you know, once you step away from TCU, I think you have a hard time, from my perspective, saying that, oh, well, Baylor will be number 2 in the league. I want to see this quarterback play. You know, I want to see how a couple of their new wide receivers step in and play for them. What's going to happen in their backfield? How's their defense going to perform? You know, some of these other teams, Baylor lost some talent too. So, you know, I think people have faith in Art Briles that he's going to reload to some extent. But K-State, who the heck knows what's going to happen with K-State? But everybody trusts Bill Snyder. So they just believe that even if K-State's not fantastic, they're going to have a team that, you know, you've got to play hard to beat them. Nobody cares about Kansas. Iowa State, who the heck knows there? Kansas, the Cyclones and the Jayhawks are probably going to be at the bottom again. Texas Tech, Kingsbury has yet to prove that the team can finish the season. They can start fast, but they finish poorly. So you got to see that. Something's got to happen there. Texas, Charlie Strong, who knows there? You know, quarterback is, again, a big question mark for that team. OU, same thing. You know, quarterback is a big question mark. So I think after TCU, the next probably 3, I say Baylor, Oklahoma State, and OU, I think are the definite next 3, and how they play is going to depend largely on how the quarterbacks step in. I think after that, Texas is kind of Texas is sort of hanging on the edge right there. If they get forced to play the freshman QB, maybe he's better than Swoops. I think behind them, you know, West Virginia might be in there a little bit with Texas as to what they're going to do. Nobody really knows. I think the Big 12 is a toss-up outside of TCU going into the season.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because at quarterback, it is TCU and Trevon Boykin, who we would expect, although he's only a season removed from being considered a marginal quarterback who should be like playing wide receiver part-time. And that's right, what he was doing at that point. But West Virginia loses a really good one in Clint Trickett. Mason Rudolph, despite the lack of experience, is probably the second best known commodity, and I phrase it that way because Swoops
Exactly.
played more, but Rudolph played better. So he's the second best known commodity at quarterback in the entire conference because K-State's got to replace their quarterback as well. So it should be interesting coming up. And we all would assume that the Baylor quarterback, Seth Russell, would step in, use all the weapons, do it well, but we don't know. He hasn't done it yet.
Right. And Texas Tech is another one that's kind of sneaky in that regard. Is they have a kid coming back, Mahomes, that has experience and looked good late in the season. So, in the Big 12, the teams that rise to the top all are teams with good QBs. Okay, the QBs perform. If the QBs don't perform, if they can't carry the team to some extent, be that field general that doesn't turn the ball over and can make a play now and again, at least on that level, then you're not going to succeed in the Big 12. You're not going to get past TCU. Their quarterback plays. They proved it last year. They've got a formula there that's working. So you want to win the Big 12, your quarterback's got to play, and I think that's why a lot of this is like, who knows? It's going to be a very exciting season, I think.
Yeah, I'm definitely on board there. That's obviously the most important position anywhere, but I think it's amplified in the Big 12 because of the style of play. And I forgot about the Texas Tech situation. Davis Webb was a really good player who put up decent numbers, but then he gets hurt, and in steps Pat Mahomes, and he lit up Baylor for 600 yards and 46 points, 6 touchdowns, and played like 4 really good football games at the end of the year. But yeah. Texas Tech, while they're still giving up 82 points a game, I'm not going to factor them into the conference race. So I think you guys are on the edge and maybe in that first row to jump in there if the top 2 slip.
Yeah, and I would say this. I think out of all the teams in the Big 12, Oklahoma State is probably the biggest wild card in the mix, because you're looking at a team that very easily has the potential to, again, little youth, maybe a little sophomore slump with Rudolph. They could stumble along and go 8-4 or 7-5, which fans would definitely be disappointed with that. At the same time, this team could easily jump up and run the table, to a 10-3, 11-2 type season, and could easily win the Big 12. I think they're the biggest by far, could go this way, could go that way. I think most of the other teams, Baylor, people kind of are expecting Baylor to be up there. OU is a little bit of a wild card in that regard also, but there's not near as much chatter about them. I think everybody else is sort of, Texas Tech, those guys will all be kind of on that end. TCU we're expecting to be up there. I think OSU's kind of the biggest. Hey, what's going to happen with that team? Are they going to be really good? Or are they going to be middle of the road? But I'm excited for fall camp to start. I know they don't talk much about it when it does get started, but 3.5 weeks, fall camp starts.
Yeah, so while we're wrapping this up and talking a little bit more expectations, there's actually a writer out there, don't know the writer, but a publication that had you in the college football playoff. So you talk about fueling expectations.
Yeah.
There it is right there. I think he was trying to come up with 4 wild cards out there. And like you say, Oklahoma State definitely fits that description. All right, Robert Whetsell of Cowboys Ride for Free. Always a good time, Robert. Appreciate the time.
Yep, thank you very much. We'll look forward to previewing, really getting into the nitty-gritty, maybe a little closer to that first game. How about that?